2036-9023 and use code 104091 *.
Se ofrecen servicios de interpretación en español para esta reunión del Consejo Municipal por teléfono. Marque el número 720-386-9023 y utilice el código 104091#.
Thank you, Mr. Gibson. City Clerk is the host of the Zoom meeting. Speakers will be able to unmute themselves when recognized. This time I'll call the meeting to order and ask the clerk to call the roll.
Mayor Huseman.
Present.
Mayor Pro Tem Alan Thomas. Councilmember Madera.
Present.
Councilmember Davis. Councilmember Noble. Councilmember Hurst.
Present.
Councilmember Grimes.
Present.
Councilmember Ford.
Present.
Councilmember Douglas. Mayor Huseman, you have a quorum.
Thanks, sir. At this time, looking for a motion and a second to approve the member not present. Excuse the member not present, excuse me. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second.
Have a motion and a second to excuse the member not present. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem. Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. I'd like to invite those present remotely to join us in a moment of silence in the Pledge of Allegiance. Pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. This time, I'm looking for a motion and a second to enter into executive session regarding the city attorney recruitment process pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, sub-parentheses F and G, for the purpose of reviewing and discussing applications and materials related to candidates for the position of city attorney, which are documents protected by the mandatory non-disclosure provision of the Colorado Open Record Act. Councilmember Grimes.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to enter into executive session for the purposes stated. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously with one excused absence. We'll now enter into executive session. We will return upon conclusion of the executive session to take action. Meeting broadcast and recording will remain up until we adjourn the meeting. The executive session is estimated to last approximately 1/2 hour. All right, we are back from our executive session. Does anybody on council wish to make a motion? Okay, we will move on. All public comment will occur during citizen communication except for public hearings. Persons who registered to speak on multiple items will be allowed to speak multiple times. Per council policy, citizen communication is the time on our agenda for the public to address council on business and affairs of the city. Per council policy, citizen communication cannot occur before the time stated in the agenda without council approval. The estimated time in the agenda for citizen communication is 6:40 p.m. By the time we actually reach citizen communication, it'll be 6:40 p.m. The city council is not able to hear any comments at this time on land use matters that are before or may come before council. Please reserve such comments for the appropriate public hearing. As a reminder, we take your comments seriously, but do not generally respond to comments until later in the evening. Council must wait until administrative council business to take action in response to citizen communication. Council members can ask questions of speakers if desired. The city needed advanced registration in order to participate virtually in citizen communication for this meeting. If you are currently in the Zoom meeting to speak during citizen communication, please listen for me to call your name, and the clerk will unmute you so you may begin. If you do not respond or are disconnected, you may miss your chance to comment. Those attending in person to speak during citizen communication will be called upon after virtual comment has concluded. Please give your name and address for the record and keep your comments limited to 3 minutes. If a council member wants to ask a question, please ask to be recognized when the speaker is finished. Thank you. First up is Anna Moriarty.
Anna, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Great, thank you so much. Thank you so much, everyone. I just wanted to get on and I guess initially start by saying thank you. The topic that I wanted to talk about is the presentation that's going to be given regarding the PUD and the Land Development Code and some interim measures that are being evaluated. And I wanted to give a large kudos and thank you. I think sometimes the city council, mayor, and even city personnel role, you don't get a thank you. You guys are acknowledging that there is an issue with development. So I appreciate the approach. And in looking at that, just some things to evaluate. Looking at the percentages increasing from 5% to 10%, wondering if there's an opportunity for that to increase with green space and open space when we look at things. And also if there would be an opportunity for city staff or city council to evaluate looking at a component wherein residences are in close proximity to interstates or highways or heavy industrial areas. If there would be an opportunity or a way to increase that green space, open space percentage for the residents that are residing in areas where there's close proximity to several state highways or interstates, large industrial areas, just to further enhance that. And as we look at Commerce City holistically, South Commerce City did have some issues with how it grew and developed. And I think you see pockets of environmental justice issues and things like that. So just looking at ways that we can prevent some of those decisions that were made in the past in that area coming back and occurring in this area as well. So, but also want to say a large thank you. I appreciate you acknowledging the issue and working to resolve it. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments this evening. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, we thank you again for your time. We'll move on to Chris Churches.
Chris, if you're in the Zoom meeting and can hit *9 on your phone or use the raise hand function in Zoom. Chris Churches. Mayor Huseman, I do not see Chris in the meeting.
Thank you. We'll move on to Anita Mercado.
Anita, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Hello?
We can hear you, Anita. You'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Okay, thank you. Hello, my name is Anita Mercado. I'm a longtime resident of Commerce City, and I am asking mayor and elected city council members I'm bringing forth a concern about allowing the fireworks in the Commerce City boundaries. I'm asking you, Mayor and City Council, to please consider reinstating the firework ban in Commerce City. On the 4th of July, the fireworks were completely out of hand. Fireworks were going off consistently until 2 a.m. in the morning in my neighborhood. My neighbors were having a family gathering to celebrate the Independence Day, and they had set out a kiddie pool for the children to play in because it was a pretty warm day. When people started letting off their fireworks, they had a stray firework enter their yard, and it exploded by the children. There was a lot of screaming, and then the arguments started between the neighbors, which was not a good thing. In the morning, we found used firework debris in our front and our backyard. Our animals had to be put inside all night because they were so scared of the fireworks. I have asthma, so I had to go inside before the Dick's fireworks display because the air was so bad and the smell of fireworks, I was having difficulty breathing. I enjoy watching families celebrating and enjoying and having fun. But what I've seen happen this year for the 4th of July was neither fun or safe for any family celebration. I ask that you please consider banning the fireworks. I also know that there was a fire in an apartment complex in my neighborhood where fireworks entered through an open window and started a fire. Luckily, it wasn't real bad, but still the concern is there. Thank you for listening to my concerns. I appreciate it.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments this evening. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Seeing none, thank you again for your time. We'll move on to Beverly Benzel.
Beverly, you should be able to unmute yourself, and you'll have 3 minutes once you begin.
Thank you. Can you hear me?
We can, yes, Beverly.
Thank you. Good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, council members, and city staff. I'm here to speak about the ordinance that was passed and published in the June 2022 Commerce City Connected. And this is a quote. As of last year, personal fireworks that are legal under the state law are now allowed in Commerce City until 11 p.m., only on July 3rd and July 4th. Unfortunately, it appeared our residents don't know state law for fireworks because they were so very out of control. I live near a school, a cul-de-sac, a church, and a small shopette with a big parking lot. Each one of these places were having a light and sound show of their own. But not just on the 4th of July. They started around the 3rd week of June, have continued until last night. Some of the fireworks were like artillery shells. The explosive sounds, flashing lights, and smell of powder are horribly offensive and upsetting to many veterans, especially those with PTSD. My husband was in the Korean War and became anxious with the smell of so much smoke in the air. Many residents with asthma, heart problems, and possibly other issues must remain indoors, and we're unable to enjoy the safety and tranquility of our patios and our yards during this time. Not only do the fireworks upset humans, but they also cause stress to animals and other wildlife. Dogs in my area were barking all day and all night, and they still continue to bark sometimes now. I was quite afraid of my home. We are currently in a drought, and fireworks were coming from all directions onto our house and our garage. I was literally praying we weren't going to have a Marshall Fire event here. Still today, I find remnants of fireworks, not only in my yard, but piles left in the streets. What is happening to our quality community? I ask you now. The noise, light, and smell pollution of fireworks on and around July 4th must once again be halted. I'm asking you, City Council, to please do not encourage fireworks by allowing fireworks stands in the city. please ban the use of fireworks altogether. And please leave the fireworks up to the professionals. I thank you for allowing me to speak tonight.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your comments. Does anybody on council have any questions for the speaker? Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. No questions, but just wanted to say thank you for coming and voicing those concerns. Although I was supportive of initially allowing fireworks again, I do think that it's very hard to manage now that we've allowed it. And I appreciate the concerns and certainly want to take that into consideration. Thank you again for coming.
Thank you.
Councilmember Noble?
Yes, thank you both, Ms. Mercado and Ms. Benzel. And I observed the same thing over several days. And even on the evening of 4th of July, I don't think I've ever seen it quite as bad in Commerce City as it was this year. But the law does not allow private aerial fireworks in the state of Colorado or in Commerce City, which is the challenge. So I'm going to ask our city manager, Mr. Tinklenberg, if there's anyone, if you could address this and whether there's anyone from representing the police department here tonight who could also address this issue.
In terms of the experience for the police officers, it is more difficult to enforce under the current code as compared to the previous ban. In terms of, I don't think we have anyone from command staff who's here that could address the question tonight, but we certainly can bring back more information later.
I think that would be worthwhile. Thank you very much.
All right, seeing no other requests for comment, thank you again, ma'am, for your time this evening. We have one in-person speaker, and that is Mr. Scott McFadden to speak on Ordinance Z-984-222. Mr. McFadden? Seeing no Mr. McFadden, we'll move on. Thank you all for speaking with us tonight. If follow-up is necessary, you should expect to be contacted by a staff member. Members of the public were also able to submit comments online and by mail. No written comments were received by the deadline. If anyone wishes to speak at a future council meeting, please check the meeting agenda and city website for information on how to register or submit written comments. We're going to move on to noticed council business. First up, we have a request for the Reunion Elementary School 4th Annual Yeti Classic Golf Tournament sponsorship. This is a request that we supported last year, and they've reached back out to us again and asked if we can support it this year. Councilmember Hurst,
So moved.
what are you moving?
Second. Second that we support it.
Oh, I don't think a motion was made.
That's what I was asking.
Oh.
We make a motion off of what you just read about the request.
All right, I have a motion to approve the sponsorship request for the 4th Annual Yeti Classic Golf Tournament. Councilmember Noble,
I'm sorry, I was.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve the sponsorship request. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. If we could get clarification on the amount of the request. What's the sponsorship level?
That's a great question. That I do not know. 1,500, was that what it was?
Remember we decided we do all schools and then
We did last year, but
That's why I was asking. Last year when we approved this, we also made a motion to support other schools in all schools within the city in the same amount. And I would just ask that if we're going to support the Yeti Classic again, that we consider doing the same.
yeah, 1 second.
It's 2,500.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate you getting to that faster than I did. So the amount would be $2,500. Is there any other discussion? Seeing no other requests for discussion, I have a motion and a second to support the Yeti Classic Golf Tournament in the amount of $2,500. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Next up, we have a request for a public hearing regarding urban collection at Settlers Crossing Subdivision Final Plat. We'll invite Councilmember Noble to introduce your item and make a motion.
Thank you very much. Yes, this is in Ward 4, and I am requesting a public hearing on this property in this project in Settlers Crossing.
Would you like to make a motion for that request?
Oh, yes, I am moving to hold a public hearing on, let's see, the number isn't here, so let me open council communication. It's I had the actual number of the, and it's not in my, it's not showing in the request now. Nope, that's not what it is.
I believe you'd like to make a motion to hold a public hearing on case S-801-21.
Yes, thank you very much.
Have a motion to.
It was in my original request on the form, and it did not translate to the council communication. My apologies, that's what I was looking for.
Have a motion to refer for public hearing, administrative subdivision case S-801-21. Is there a second? Councilmember Alan Thomas.
Second the motion.
Have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Mayor Pro Tem? All right, seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
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 Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
And that is going to fail 4-4 on a tie vote. You were a nay,
Could I have a voice vote, please? I mean, by name?
Mr. Gibson, would you cue that up for a roll call vote, please?
I'd be happy to, Mayor. Give me just one moment. All right, your vote is open.
All right. And again, motion fails 4-4. All right, Sand Creek Greenway Foundation Annual Event Sponsorship Request, Councilmember Noble.
Yes, thank you very much.
Microphone, please.
The Sand Creek Greenway Foundation is having its annual event in August, and there are levels of sponsorship. I am recommending a sponsorship of $1,250, which is it's right smack in the middle of all of the sponsorship options. This material was completed, and I don't believe that we have it in our packet. So the event is August 6th. The location is Sand Creek Park, 2700 North Peoria Street. The amount is $1,250. Again, the current miscellaneous sponsorship budget is $31,500. The balance of the budget is currently $10,730. And the foundation, of course, is a nonprofit. So I would like to make a motion to approve a $1,250 sponsorship donation to the Sand Creek Regional Greenway Foundation event, a night on the Greenway.
I have a motion to approve sponsorship request in the amount of $1,250 for the Sand Creek Greenway Foundation Annual Event. Is there a second? Councilmember Hurst.
I'll second.
I have a motion and a second. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll now move on to proclamations and recognitions. We have our Memorial Day award winners. We'll invite Travis Huntington, Community Relations Manager, to introduce the award winners. Looking mighty dapper tonight.
All right, good evening, Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, members of City Council. I'm Travis Huntington, the city's Community Relations Manager, and I'm glad to be here with you tonight to recognize the award winners from our 56th Annual Memorial Day Parade. And as you know, the parade has been a Commerce City tradition dating all the way back to 1964. It has occurred every year except the last two due to the COVID-19 pandemic. So since the parade was returning from a 2-year hiatus this year, typically at this event, we give our award winners the opportunity to be presented in front of City Council. Usually we only have our first place winners, but this year we decided to invite everybody, because we haven't done this for a couple of years. So just to recognize the contributions of the people who make the parade great, of course, because it's a celebrated Commerce City tradition, but the parade is only as good as the people who participate in it. So we appreciate everybody for spending their time and energy to make our parade special. So we appreciate the opportunity to recognize everybody here tonight. So without further ado, I'm going to start introducing our award winners. If you are in the audience, when I call your organization's name, please come forward and grab your award. And then at the end, we're going to see if we can fit everybody up here for one picture. How's that sound? Okay, so our first award we want to recognize is our Grand Marshal's Choice, which this year we had 2 Grand Marshals, Mr. Barry Reese and Mr. Sean Moss, and they have selected New Hope Ministries and their entry as our Grand Marshal's Choice. All right, for our Community Spirit Award, we have a first, second, and third place to recognize. So our third place award winner in the Community Spirit category is the South Adams County Fire District. All right, second place is another one of our fellow agencies here in the city. We have the Adams 14 School District. All right, first place in our Community Spirit category is retired Marine Colonel Stan Triggs, who, if you remember, is a regular at the parade in his 1976 Dodge pickup with all the Marine Corps imagery on it. I do not believe the Colonel is here this evening, however. Or is he? Oh. All right, perfect.
Thank you very much. Appreciate it.
All right, next up, we have our most creative category. Our third place winner there was the Military Vehicle Collectors of Colorado, who even drove our Grand Marshals this year in the U.S. Army Jeeps as well. But again, I don't believe they were coming in person. Maybe? No, okay. Second place, we have the Retired and Enlisted Association, Chapter 39, for their Vietnam Memorial replica float. All right. And then first place for the most creative category this year was the Take Flight Leadership Aviation, Bessie Coleman Flag Girls and Boys Flight Program. All right. We'll catch up with them later. Most patriotic category, our third place award winner was the Mile High Veterans Float. Second place for that category was also the Military Vehicle Collectors of Colorado. And in first place, we had the Marine Corps League Broomfield Detachment and Foothills Young Marines. And those are the well-known floats with the Tomb of the Unknown Soldier and the Iwo Jima flag raising. Make sure I got the right one. All right. Thank you, sir. Thank you. All right. And our final category, wait, did I get them all? Yeah. Our final category for this evening is the Best of Parade. And in third place this year for Best of Parade, we have the Commerce City Youth Commission. In second place, we also had the Marine Corps League Broomfield Detachment at Foothills Young Marines. And first place this year for Best of Parade was a float featuring a theme where 4 ministers gave their life jackets to people who were drowning at sea and sacrificed themselves for others. That was the American Legion Post 151. All right, so maybe one more big round of applause for all of our winners. Thank you. If it's agreeable to everyone, we'll try to grab a photo now with all of our winners up on the stage with the City Council. Yeah, you guys can step forward, and then if we can squeeze it a little tighter. Ready? All right, we're gonna take a couple because we got a lot of people. We're gonna try to get all the eyes open. All right, big smiles, everybody. Thank you all.
Good, thanks.
What's that?
He's got a couple robes he wears, you know? Just to switch out.
I guess.
I didn't know that.
I don't know what I do with my hangers I brought to work. Maybe they're in my bag, I don't know. All right. Congratulations again to all the winners for the Memorial Day Parade, and thank you for your participation and making it the event that it is every year. We're going to move on to presentations now. First up is the Environmental Planning Policy and Oil and Gas Monthly Update. I'd like to invite the one and only Dr. Rosemarie Russo, Environmental Planner, forward to make the presentation.
Thank you and good evening. Well, the first update we have is one from EPA. So some of you may know EPA revised its PFAS health advisories. And so it went from 70 parts per trillion down to less than 1%. And so currently our drinking water was averaging 5% and 13% parts per trillion. And so what South Adams County is doing is buying additional water from Denver to lower the levels. And they're also pursuing funding for treatment options. And so there is funding available through the infrastructure bill. And so that is their strategy. Again, this is a health advisory. It's not a regulatory limit. And part of the update is also about our EPAC committee and our Lotus and Pinion environmental contract. So EPAC is forging ahead. We've had 4 meetings and we have 4 more scheduled. We have one scheduled this week. And EPAC is setting draft recommendations for different environmental policies. And so far we have covered air quality, water conservation, greenhouse gases, waste diversion, tree canopy, and community gardens. Over the weekend at the Cultivando Festival, we actually spent some time getting feedback from community members as well on our draft recommendations so far. Next month, Lotus and Pinion are going to come and do an update, mostly about their the LID manual. So the LID manual is really about low-impact development. It's a way to think about how to manage stormwater and keep concentration of pollutants from water bodies. So that's done through how we develop within the community. And so the whole idea is really to think about impervious surfaces. It also involves landscaping, and so they're going to bring all those options next month in more detail. And then also part of it is really to come up with strategies that meet that triple bottom line, so looking at the ones that are the most cost effective. So now switching gears to Suncor, I just wanted to give you a status update about Suncor's improvement plan. So part of the settlement agreement that Suncor had with Cdbg is they had to develop this improvement plan. And part of the improvement plan had required measures and voluntary measures. And so over the last quarter, they finished up making improvements to that FCC units. So those are the gas-making units. And basically, what Suncor has done is they invested $12 million on these FCC units. And as you can see, I think I shared this graph with you at the last meeting, but if you look at Plant 1 and Plant 2, the FCC units account for 21% of the exceedances. So by addressing upgrades to that, we're going to really reduce exceedances. So this is this is a little technical, but basically, in case you have never seen a gas-making unit, the FCC unit has these like redundant safety measures set in, and they can program them, and basically it will allow them to shut down the units. In your packet are the Exceedance Reports, and I just wanted to remind everybody that they are on the city's website now. They're in different forms, and so they have the exceedances chronologically, as Councilwoman Noble had requested, and then also the exceedances compared to the community monitors in terms of health impacts. And so that was how Council Member Madeira had requested. So there, if you go to the website, there's just different tabs, and so you can see them in different formats. So over the last month, there were 7 events, 13 different exceedances, because sometimes when there's an event, there's different pollutants. There's also one notification about EPRA. So EPRA is a different law outside of their permit that they have to abide by, and so there is one limit that they had. And then in terms of water, the NPDES violations, there were no water exceedances. For the legislative updates, the city has submitted 2 public comments. One was about the Title V permit. It was a 9-page memo. It was very well researched. I think will have a positive impact on community health. And then we also submitted a public comment about water quality. In terms of our oil and gas, Civitas has verbally expressed their intention to withdraw all the applications except for Blue Jay and Pelican. So we're reducing the number of applications. And then the city is expecting a resubmittal from the applicant next month. So that's the map again. You've seen this map before. But again, the only 2 that are under review right now are the Pelican and Blue Jay. So that's the update for this evening, but I'm happy to answer questions.
Thank you, ma'am. Appreciate your presentation. And I just want to say I was reviewing the letter that you wrote, and I think it was very well worded, so thank you very much for that.
You're welcome.
Does anybody on council have any questions? Councilmember Noble.
Yes, thank you very much, Mayor. Thank you very much, Doctor. Yes, that was a very well-written letter and really presented the case well. Thank you for that. I was wondering about the 2 oil and gas sites. Previously, they were going to do Pelican and Harlow. So Harlow was at Reunion Ridge. So it appears that Harlow is one of them that they are now thinking about pulling?
Yes.
Okay, so just to clarify for everyone, Blue Jay is on the east side of E470. The site is on the east side of E470 on TR Ranch around 112th. Last we saw, that site would horizontally fracture to the north. Pelican is at around E470 and 104th. And as we last saw, when we had, when we were able to see applications for where the drilling would occur, this drilling was to occur under South Lawn, East Point, so forth, all the way to Chambers Road, just for anyone who's listening so they can be aware of what we're talking about here. We don't do the drilling though, we do the sites. I was wondering if we have an update on the, in 2020, we had a $350,000 contract with environmental consultants. Do you still work with them? Does the city work with them? We haven't seen anything from them.
So that's the Lotus Pinion contract? Yeah, so they're going to come next month and give an update. So they've been working on that LID.
Oh, okay. All right, great. And
the EPAC as well. They've helped facilitate.
Okay, and the other part that they were going to work on was sustainability. and they were going to be working with, internally with the city on sustainability. How's that going? How's the progress on that?
So they issued, I think it was about a 21-page memo with recommendations, and so we are developing a sustainability team, and we'll move forward with that based on their different tiers. So they had 3 tiers of recommendations.
Do we have an ETA on the team, when the team will be in place?
Hopefully within a month or 2.
Okay. And then the final thing is that I know that I was at Eco Fiesta on Saturday, and Cultivando is looking for a location for a stationary air quality monitor, and they would need electrical access. It needs to be very close to Suncor. So I would like to just put the word out to the community, to anyone who's listening. If they have a location that's near Suncor, this is part of the settlement with Suncor, the Cdbg settlement. Cultivando won a very sizable award to do monitoring as a community-based organization, but it is not them doing it. It's very well-regarded scientists who are doing the monitoring, but they need a location for the stationary one. So I hope that perhaps people could get in touch with you, Dr. Russo, if...
Absolutely. We did look at parks. We were looking at Eagle Point, but they don't have the required electrical, so they need it 220. And so I actually had a discussion today with Parks about it, because they wanted at Eagle Point because they had a secured area, because the last thing we want is they're very expensive monitors, so we don't want them to be vandalized. And so I was going to reach out to actually Excel tomorrow and see within the community where those where would be sources for 220 that are, again, within, like, they're searching for a mile and a half. So those are the sort of parameters we're looking for.
Okay, excellent. Thank you very much.
Councilmember Madera.
So the SEC is proposing some greenhouse gas disclosure rules. And, you know, it's basically broken out to 3 scopes, 1 being, you know, your direct emissions, 2 being indirect, like, you know, power that you buy from Excel, and then scope 3 is basically everything else. So anything that you buy from businesses, you know, the emissions that they're emitting and producing those items and getting them to the city. Have we looked at doing any type of reporting, you know, similar to that for the city? I know it's not a requirement for the city, but I think we're kind of, you know, moving that direction where we really need to take account of, you know, what our emissions are and, you know, work towards improving those.
I completely agree, and I think Councilwoman Grimes had mentioned it a few meetings ago. That would be the greenhouse gas inventory. So we hadn't budgeted for that within that Lotus Pinion contract. So I did get an estimate, and it would be approximately $8,000, and so we would need the funding to do it. I think it's a great idea, because that's how you really set measurable goals, by knowing what your inventory is. And so if we're going to set like a transportation goal, we would need to know what the emissions are under each of those scopes.
So it is on the radar to implement something like that?
It's on the radar, but it's not budgeted.
Thank you.
It's fairly complicated to do an inventory. I've done several of them, and it's a time-consuming process, and to be data-driven, it really takes some time to do it accurately.
I'm doing one at my company, and just want to make sure that everyone's joining in on the fun.
Well, you know, I can help you if your company needs any assistance, actually. Just give me a holler, because I've done probably 24 at least.
And just as a friendly reminder, the city did conduct a community-wide GHG inventory So I think you're speaking to one of our own operations and facilities.
Yeah.
Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, thank you for the presentation tonight. One of the interesting things I believe you talked about was the PFAS health change from the federal government, from the EPA. It sounded like the water district's going after federal funds, but there's also Senate Bill 2218, also known as the PFAS-PFOA Mitigation Fund. It should help us to address directly and possibly even push through a faster process. So I know that fund was built 2 years ago, and it's had pretty significant funding. It's a max cap of $8 million a year, but I think it's been close every year since. So that could be another opportunity for those enhancements that you're talking about for the water district itself, but also maybe identifying the source so there can be some cleanup in the future.
Yeah, there's some innovative projects going around in the country about doing stream bank restoration because PFAS can travel. But if you have a clay or organics along the stream banks, that will stop some of the PFAS from getting into the water bodies. That's a few people actually brought that up at the festival this weekend.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Thanks for the presentation again. Could we expect a request for an appropriation for a GHD inventory for the city, or would you need us to make a motion to direct to do that? And kind of a secondary question, is that an additional part of the scope of the work that Lotus is already doing, or would we have to direct that as well?
It's not, sorry.
Go for it, Dr. Rousseau.
It's not part of their current contract.
But to that, it would not be necessary. So we have to work through the contractual agreement with the city attorney's office. But as it relates to the necessary funding for it, it would not be necessary for a new budget reappropriation for city council.
And so what direction would be needed to move that forward?
I think if there's a general consensus by the council, we will take that as direction.
Okay.
All right, seeing no other requests for questions or comments, thank you again for your time this evening, ma'am.
You're welcome. Thank you.
We're going to move on to changes to the LDC regarding PUDs. I'd like to invite Jim Tolbert, Community Development Director, forward to make the presentation.
There it came on. Thank you, Mr. Mayor and Council. Just take a few minutes tonight. We've been talking for some time, basically since I arrived on the scene, about the need for some changes to our PUD process. As you know, we are working on getting a complete overhaul of the land development code. But there's some things I think that council has raised as issues that we thought we could move on a little faster. There are three basic areas that we would propose to address right now. The concern regarding the lack of commercial development we see in a lot of our PUDs. Concerns regarding mixed-use designations that end up being completely residential. And then the amount of parkland that's provided is often too small or too split up to be of any real use to the residents in a development. So what we're looking at doing is thinking about, a PUD ought to be for something substantial. They were originally developed, the intent was that the developer got some relaxation and changes to some standards in return for something that was given to the community. They're not intended for small little developments. So we're proposing that we change right now to a minimum size of 50 acres. that we add a requirement for a concept plan. A lot of the communities in the state do this, and that concept plan would be fairly detailed, and it would be stated that once it's approved by council, there would not be any reduction in parkland, any reduction of land for commercial use, or if there was a condition of approval was placed in the PUD that prohibits those proposed changes, any change would have to come back through a public process. We would allow some smaller changes without council approval for things like a slight shift in access points, if Public Works was okay with it, that you get a lot of times in design. And I don't mean moving an access half a mile or quarter mile. I just mean, a few hundred feet one way or the other, again, because as you get into the actual engineering, those things come up. Also, that they could reduce the units and lots, but not change the housing type. So they couldn't propose a single family and come back in with a multifamily and not have it come back through a complete public process. It would require a higher level of site design. And again, no PUD development plan would be allowed, except, as I mentioned, with those two minor things, if it varies from the concept plan. If so, the whole document must go back through a public process. We would suggest changing any reference to mixed use to require 2 uses as a minimum. If they want to do mixed use, you clearly state there's at least 2 uses, and the lesser use has to comprise 25% of the total development site. And then the concept plan must show the potential mix of uses. Again, there's some debate about the clarity in our current ordinance when it comes to the way they were done over the last 20 years of mixed use, the way they've been written creatively. We'd also look at changing the parkland requirement to 10% of the total land area, up from 5%. Of the 10%, a total of 5% of that must be in one parcel, no smaller than 1 acre. So as we've seen, we have a lot of developments that have split up the parkland. They've used excess right-of-way, things like that, to try to get to a park, and they don't really constitute parks. This is not an uncommon requirement. There are a lot of, again, of our sister cities that have things like this, that it would also have to be no smaller than 1 acre, that it must have a minimum dimension of 150 feet on all sides, so it couldn't be just a long linear strip. And unlike our current proposal, we would not allow the parkland to include floodplains, drainage ways, or floodways, and it must contain amenities, such as playgrounds, ball fields, et cetera, whatever they want to propose that are true amenities. That trails may not count towards the first 3%. So in other words, 3% of it would have to go into legitimate parks. Then they could do trails, which are not illegitimate parks, but they're just not the same as having a place to take your children to play or the dog to walk or that sort of thing. And then when the densities grow to greater than 8%, we would require the parkland rise to 15% there. Again, more people, more packed in, that we would require more parkland. And then we would have a requirement that any arterial frontage must be designated for non-residential uses, as well as a corner where a collector intersects an arterial or another major collector. So the prime areas for commercial growth, we would try to preserve for commercial growth and not have those turn into multifamily or even single family, as we've seen recently. Where we are with this, after tonight, we intend to study session it with the Planning Commission tomorrow night. They have a special meeting. We take it back in August for a PC recommendation, and then hope to have it on your agenda if you see fit with moving forward in mid-September for your adoption. Again, these are just intended as interim changes while we have time to look at the overall land development code and make what may be more comprehensive changes, but trying to deal with some of the things in PUDs that have been giving us problems. And again, this would only apply to new PUDs or substantial amendments to a current PUD. We can't retroactively make them deal with the PUDs that have been approved, but it would give us some way to make sure that we've got more quality development going forward. So thank you very much. Glad to answer any questions.
Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Could you go back a couple slides for me?
I'm sorry?
Can you go back a couple slides, please?
Oh, yes, sir.
Back to where you were talking about the parkland?
Yes, sir. I hope I can. There you go.
Thank you. So we say change parkland requirement to 10% of total land area And then down here on the next line here, we say trails may not be counted towards the first 3%.
Right, so a trail could theoretically be 7% of the land area, depending on, if it was a real trail. But in other words, 3%, so in a 50-acre minimum, an acre and a half would have to be devoted to park, which an acre of that would have to be in one site.
Okay, thank you. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Tolbert, Mayor Pro Tem?
Yes, thank you, Mayor, and thank you for tonight's presentation. I was just curious if it can be added to include expanding the school property by 50% to accommodate for future growth, specifically with parking and future open space around the school property.
Again, these are just looking at the HOA parks. We're not proposing changing any of our requirements on public park land dedication at this time, but looking at, or school dedication, but looking at that more holistically in the complete rewrite that we're about to embark on.
Okay, so that's coming up later then?
Yes, ma'am. We have received proposals. We're evaluating those, and we'll be coming to you shortly with a recommendation for a firm to hire into contract with to perform that for us.
All right, thank you.
Councilmember Noble?
Thank you very much. You've addressed a lot of concerns that you have heard at these meetings over time, and I really appreciate that. What would you describe as two uses in mixed use? Would that be resident, single family and apartments, or?
I would, we've got to work a little on definition, but I would think it would be commercial and residential. I see mixed housing types as single family versus multifamily. But again, if it was proposed that way, it would come to council. It may not have a positive recommendation, and that may be the only thing that's appropriate for some sites. They may not have any commercial frontage that we would want commercial frontage. But, if they called it mixed use, then it's truly got to be something that's mixed. And it gets, we got to, when we bring an ordinance forward, we'll have that defined a little better. But again, if there's prime property that ought to be commercial, we would want it to be a commercial and a residential, or it could be industrial, and again, depending on what it is. And then in some cases, again, if it doesn't have the road access or frontage to support commercial, then it might be two different types of residential, but then they could just do it as a straight, one use. And they may not even qualify for meet the intent of a PUD at that point.
Yes, I appreciate the effort to clarify mixed use. It has been very confusing and used in the wrong ways, I think, many times. And what about an inventory of parkland among other cities? One of the benefits of going on the Home Builders Association tour a month or so ago was that I was in other cities and other council people were on that tour as well, and we were all talking about various park requirements. And it's my understanding that Aurora has a minimum park requirement of 20%. And I just want to make sure that Commerce City is similar to other communities in terms of what we are providing for our residents in terms of park space.
Well, as you know, when you sign the contract for the comprehensive plan update, part of that, another step was a Parks and Rec master plan. And one of the work items they'll have is to evaluate and do some benchmarking of our parkland compared to what our other communities are getting, which I fully intend that to inform the update of the LDC. So if we are lacking in what we're requiring, lagging behind the other communities, we'll be able to do that. But that piece of them doing the background work in the Park and Rec master plan will help inform that, and we'll get a good picture of how we compare, both in what we have on the ground compared to the population and what we're obtaining in new development.
I appreciate that. It's just that we have so many projects coming through, just as we saw tonight when I tried to get a public hearing on a project, that if we don't have the park requirements in place now, it won't do us any good a year and a half from now, because this is all getting built in.
That's been the whole concern that I've had since we started, but to require more exactions from the developers, we really need some good facts and figures to base it on, and that will give us this. Again, these are the HOA parks we're talking about now. We're going to fully evaluate our public park donations as we move forward. And it's, we've written the RFP for the consultant that if we see pieces that, that we come to a conclusion on early, we can ask for the recommendation on that and could even move forward. We don't have to wait the full year or so until the LDC is ready for adoption. We could get things in the interim because we do know that there are issues like that are out there.
Okay, I have faith you'll do so. Thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Councilmember Hurst?
Quickly, tangential to that, I would just hope that we can, in that study, look for balance. One of the things I would be concerned about is HOA parks or community parks that aren't funded by the city come with a cost as well, and trying to balance that, additional cost with needs. Of course, I'm not advocating that we need less parks or anything like that, but the fancier the park, the more it costs to upkeep it, and that's all translated into either HOA dues or property taxes, depending on how the community's ran.
Yes, sir.
All right, thank you again, sir. Appreciate the presentation, and thanks for reading the memo on the dress for tonight's meeting.
Thank you.
Nobody? The dress code? Nobody? You guys letting me down tonight. We're going to move on to the consent agenda. The consent agenda includes items that are routine, procedural, informational, self-explanatory, and non-controversial. They are presented to council for a single motion and vote. Any member of council may ask to remove a specific item for further discussion and a separate vote. Tonight, there are 14 items listed under the consent agenda. This time, does anybody wish to remove an item off the consent agenda? Councilmember Madera.
Yeah, I'd like to remove Resolution 2022-73.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, I'd like to remove Resolution 2022-63.
Are there any others? All right. Looking for a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended, which is removing Resolutions 2022-73 and Resolution 2022-63. Councilmember Grimes?
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the consent agenda as amended. Will the clerk please read the titles and take a roll call vote?
Minutes of the June 20th, 2022 regular meeting, minutes of the June 27th, 2022 special meeting, minutes of the June 29th, 2022 special meeting, Ordinance AN 26522, and ordinance annexing the property generally located at 7001 Colorado Boulevard, Adams County, Colorado, to the City of Commerce City, Colorado, in case AN 26522, known as the 7001 Colorado Boulevard annexation. Ordinance 2396, an ordinance vacating right-of-way along Colorado Boulevard consisting of the northwest side of the realigned Colorado Boulevard south of the Burlington Ditch at East 72nd Avenue, Commerce City, Colorado. Ordinance 2399, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Local Affairs grant in the amount of $13,000 for Defense Council first appearance and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Ordinance 2400, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Tony Gramscis Youth Services Grant Fund in the amount of $79,739 for the support of activities and classes to community youth and the authorization of the expenditures thereof. Ordinance 2403, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Transportation grant in the amount of $13,000 for driving under the influence enforcement efforts and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Ordinance 2404, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Colorado Department of Human Services grant in the amount of $79,449 for the support licensed facilities that service children thereof. Resolution 2022-67, a resolution extending the waiver of development-related and other city fees for certain nonprofit organizations and authorizing the rebate of use tax collected for certain new development by or for certain nonprofit organizations in the City of Commerce City. Resolution 2022-70, a resolution repealing and replacing Resolution 2020-77, establishing the Diversity and Inclusion Commission, Resolution 2021-32, renaming to be the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission, and Resolution 2021-48, amending the membership of the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission to specify term limits for the Diversity, Equity, and Inclusion Commission. Resolution 2022-71, a resolution establishing terms and term limits for commissioners of the Commerce City Housing Authority Board. Your vote is open.
All right, consent agenda as amended passes unanimously 8-0 with one excused absence. Councilmember Dara, you wish to remove Resolution 2022-73. The floor is yours.
Yeah, I removed the resolution appointing substitute judges for the municipal court, primarily because I wanted to ask questions of the judge about his appointment, why he appointed the judges that he did, and how they were representative of the city. So I'd like to make a motion to continue this until a date that we can have the judge come in and answer some questions. Oh, is he here? Oh.
Good evening.
Yeah, thank you for being here. I guess my primary concern is, we had Judge Juarez here for decades, and he was very representative of the community and, an integral part of the courthouse. So, my question, I guess, was, how did you appoint these judges? And, primarily the two new ones, because I think we're all familiar with Judge Klein. She's been here for a long time and does amazing work for the city.
She really does a great job. She was very helpful to me in my transition, so I'm happy to step over that. Judge Goodby, Michael Goodby, is a retired district court judge from Adams County. He lives in Adams County. He sits as a municipal judge in Idaho Springs, and also in Golden. And so he's familiar both with our community generally. He continues to reside in the county, and he's also familiar with being a municipal judge. The last thing we want to do is bring in somebody who's going to cause a problem for the court and thereby for the city. So Mike knows our community, has a strong work ethic. I feel that he has, without question, the integrity that any court would need, and this court also, to continue the legacy of Judge Juarez. And then our other name is Josh Nowak. And Josh is a younger lawyer. He's somebody who needs the opportunity to become and see if being a municipal judge or being a judicial officer is appropriate for him. He is diverse. He lives in Thornton in our county. He's a former public defender. He's now in private practice. He's well versed in what our community is about. He has appeared before me. I have no questions of integrity, but he is somebody who will need to be coached along. And his father's from Mexico, and I've inquired of him if he is bilingual. He's indicated that he knows a lot, but he wouldn't call himself bilingual. But that's something he's willing to work on.
Okay. And then my final question is, I don't know if this was related to you, but one of our finalists was Annie Martinez, and we discussed on council about possibly bringing her in as a relief judge. Did anyone from your office reach out to her, or?
My understanding is she does not live in the county, and I understand from the city attorney that that's not a requirement, but I think it's a good idea. I think it's a way that the representatives are regionally located and familiar with the community. So that was not one. We could certainly do that if that's the preference of council. But again, my understanding is she does not reside within the county.
Thank you.
Thank you, Judge. Appreciate you being here. Does anybody else have any questions for the judge? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2022-73. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2022-73. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title?
Resolution 2022-73, a resolution appointing substitute judges for the municipal court of the city of Commerce City.
All right, I have a motion and a second to approve Resolution 2022-73. The title has been read. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously, 8-0 with one excused absence. We'll move on to Resolution 2022-63 that was pulled from the consent agenda by Mayor Pro Tem. Ma'am, the floor is yours.
Yes, I'd like to remove Resolution 2022-63. Previously, Councilmember Grimes requested a study session on the homeless, which we have not had yet. We haven't had any briefings or presentations on what this memorandum of understanding is or what our responsibilities or limitations are as a result of signing it. I feel it should be moved to a study session for further discussion prior to being put on the agenda. I also don't feel items like this should be buried in a consent agenda when we haven't had discussion on the topic. So I'd like to make a motion that this is put to a study session.
I have a motion to continue Resolution 2022-63 and have it appear as a subject in a study session. Do you have a date picked out for that motion, ma'am?
Within the next month is fine.
When convenient, within the next month. Is there a second? Councilmember Noble?
Yes, I'd like to second that.
Have a motion and a second to continue Resolution 2022-63 and have a study session to discuss it within the next month when available. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Madera?
I just have one question. Is this a time-sensitive matter that we would need to approve for any reason?
Thank you. There is no deadline per se, but we are about the last community in the group to consider this. It's been adopted by Adams County and a number of other jurisdictions.
And I know we're using ARPA funds for this. What's the timeline to use those funds?
Jim, if I may. Trenton Robinson, Management Analyst. The ARPA fund deadline is separate from this Memorandum of Understanding. This MOU is purely a symbolic motion supporting our efforts for addressing homelessness within Adams County. The ARPA funding is separate. The deadline for using the ARPA funds is the end of 2024, or at least having them committed by the end of 2026. So that is not part of the consideration here.
So if we were to approve this today, it's more just kind of our good faith show that we're in agreement and joining the rest of these communities to do something about homelessness and address the issue?
Yes, sir.
But it wouldn't be binding necessarily?
Not from our understanding. There's no commitment of funds or commitment of resources, purely that we will continue working with other communities, other municipalities on issues of homelessness like staff has already been doing.
Thank you.
Councilmember Grimes?
My question was answered. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble?
I am supporting Mayor Pro Tem's motion because I do think this is critically important for us to discuss again. We have discussed it only once, I believe, in a study session, and there were a lot of questions that arose at that time. I'm in the Airport Coordinating Committee, and a lot of cities have signed on to a memorandum of understanding, but one hasn't, and that would be Denver. And it's been almost a year waiting for them. It hasn't prevented us from moving forward. So I think that the urgency of having more discussion regarding homelessness plans in Commerce City and what we are doing to prevent homelessness is important, and the memorandum can wait until we have that discussion.
All right, I have a motion and a second to continue Resolution 2022-63 to a future date and have a study session on it within a month as time permits. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion is going to pass 6-2. Next up, we have an administrative appeal to address. The appeal is by Clayton Properties Group, LLC, doing business as Oakwood Homes, of the denial by the decision of the Community Development Director. The hearing was continued from June 20th, 2022. City Council has been provided with a draft order relaying our findings and denying the application for a terminology adjustment. This time, I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the written order. Councilmember Noble? Councilmember Dara?
Second.
I have a motion and a second to approve the written order. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, have a motion and a second to approve the written order. We'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion is going to carry 7 in the affirmative, 1 nay, and 1 excused absence. All right, we'll go ahead and take a 5-minute recess before we get into the numerous ordinances on first reading that we have. schedule. Hopefully we can continue that pace and continue doing this in a methodical and efficient manner as possible. We're going to move on to ordinances on first reading. Do want to make it known that Councilmember Davis has exited the meeting, and we will move on. First up is ordinance 2407, recognition of the HUD Cdbg grant. Does anybody on council have any questions for staff regarding this ordinance? Seeing none, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2407. Councilmember Madera,
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve ordinance introduced by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2407. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2407, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the U.S. Department of Housing and Urban Development Community Development Block Grant Funds in the amount of $422,541 and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Your vote is open.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0 with 2 excused absences. Next up, we're going to move to ordinance 2408, Board and Commission Term Limits Code Amendment. We'll allow Dylan Gibson, City Clerk, to provide an update on the ordinance.
Thank you, Honorable Mayor, Mayor Pro Tem, and members of City Council. This ordinance is coming before you after the direction we received a couple weeks ago to institute term limits for the various boards and commissions. This will amend the city's code for all those codified boards and commissions. Our goal was to make this consistent across all boards and commissions. So in reviewing the code, we noticed that the Senior Commission and the Veterans Commission had a unique quorum requirement of a quorum of the appointed members plus 1 council member. So we did change that. That wasn't in the draft that was in your packet from a couple weeks ago, but we made that change in order to make sure that the members that show up that are appointed and meet quorum are still able to meet if 1 council member that's appointed to that board or commission is unable to attend that meeting. So that's the only substantive change between when we presented this a couple weeks ago to tonight. So I just wanted to make a note of that. Thank you.
Thank you for that. This time, looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2408. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes.
I'll second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2408. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2408, an ordinance amending the Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to specify term limits of board and commission members of the Derby Review Board, Youth Commission, Citizens Public Safety Advisory Board, Senior Commission, and Veterans Commission. Your vote is open.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0 with 2 absences. We're going to move on to ordinance 2409, recognition of the Dr. Coggs Safer Main Street Grant. Staff is available to answer any questions if anybody on council has any. Seeing no request for questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2409. Councilmember Madera.
So moved.
Mayor Pro Tem.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2409. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2409, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Dr. Cog Safer Main Street Program grant in the amount of $2,720,000 and the expenditure thereof. Your vote is open.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0, 2 excused absences. Next up is ordinance 2410, recognition of the Pool Special Initiative 2022 grant. Does anybody on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no request for questions, I'm looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2410. Mayor Pro Tem.
So moved.
Councilmember Madera.
Second.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading, ordinance 2410. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2410, an ordinance amending the 2022 budget of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by the recognition of the Pool Special Initiative 2022 grant in the amount of $12,500 and the authorization of the expenditure thereof. Your vote is open.
Motion carries unanimously, 7-0 with 2 excused absences. We're now moving on to Ordinance 2412, Automatic Time of Adjournment Code Amendment. Does anybody on council have any questions for staff? Seeing no request for questions, looking for a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading Ordinance 2412. Councilmember Madera,
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading Ordinance 2412. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble.
Yes, I'm not clear on why we need this ordinance since we voted on this previously. How is this different than our previous vote?
If I may, your previous vote was to direct the city attorney to prepare this for you to actually vote on. So before you gave direction, and this is the actual amendment to the municipal code.
For the past year, we have been stopping at 10:30 and then taking votes after that.
Right. The change that occurred here is instead of having a 4.5-hour limit, we have a hard stop at 10:30. And then the vote to extend the meeting does not have to be strictly in 30-minute increments, but can be in whatever increment the motion maker desires.
Okay. Then the last question I have is for the motion maker, Councilmember Madera. Councilmember Madera, does this in any way curtail deliberation and debate of the city council members?
No, this is more for setting the agenda to, make sure that our meetings have a target, end time, rather than stacking the agenda. And, lately we've seen the agenda is scheduled to go well beyond 10:30. And, it's just in the spirit of transparency, most people aren't watching council meetings past 10:30, and if we're doing decisions that are important to the city, I think transparency is key, and we shouldn't be doing those at midnight or 1 o'clock in the morning when people are in bed and getting ready for the next day's workday.
Okay, thank you very much. That's what I was hoping, that it would be not to curtail deliberation and debate, but was more of a agenda management control. Okay, thank you very much. You have my support.
Is there any other discussion? Seeing none, I have a motion and a second to introduce by council as seated and approve on first reading Ordinance 2410. Will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2412, an ordinance amending Section 2-2003, time of adjournment of the City of Commerce City Revised Municipal Code to automatically cause all regular and special meetings and study sessions to automatically adjourn at 10:30 p.m. unless otherwise extended. Your vote is open.
Motion carries with a vote 6-1 and 2 excused absences. We'll move on to ordinance on second reading. Ordinance 2360, an IGA with the Buffalo Ridge Metro District for 120th Avenue Road improvements. This ordinance was approved unanimously. However, modifications to the ordinance between first and second reading were made, and staff is here to provide an update. I'd like to invite Jenna Lowry, Executive Management Analyst, to provide an update on the ordinance.
Thank you, Mayor and City Council. So to clarify, the ordinance itself is the same. There is a small change within the body of the IGA. So on first reading, if you recall, there was a term that required the Metro District to pave a golf course access trail that's currently just some fine crusher gravel. The update is that the district has agreed to pave the trail. However, they've capped that contribution at $40,000. Our Public Works team did do our own cost estimate, and that $40,000 will be more than sufficient. So staff does not have any concern with having that term in the IGA. Just wanted to bring that to your attention. Otherwise, the terms are the same as they were in the first reading. Thank you.
Thank you, ma'am. Does anybody on council have any questions for that? Seeing none, looking for a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading, Ordinance 2360. Councilmember Hurst.
So moved.
Councilmember Grimes.
Second the motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading, Ordinance 2360. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, will the clerk please read the title and take a roll call vote?
Ordinance 2360, an ordinance approving an intergovernmental agreement between the City of Commerce City and Buffalo Ridge Metropolitan District for the 120th Avenue Road Improvement Project and authorization of the expenditures thereof. Your vote is open.
All right, ordinance passes unanimously 7-0 with 2 absences. Next up is ordinance Z-984-22, 7001 Colorado Boulevard zoning ordinance. This ordinance was not approved unanimously and was not placed on consent agenda, and staff has a land use clarification in regards to the ordinance. I'd like to invite Jim Tolbert, Community Development Director, to provide an update on the ordinance.
Sure. Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Council, I wanted to take a minute and clarify a couple of things that from first reading, that you approved this on first reading on the June the 20th. At that time, there were some questions raised about could there be commercial development in this property? And the answers that were given, unfortunately, misinterpreted my opinion that I had given as an interpretation of the code previously. The zoning request is for an R3. The R3 is for multifamily. It is strictly a residential. The applicant had reached out to me back in January and asked about a community room of some sort, and I had said that a community room as an ancillary use to the use there of multifamily would be appropriate, but did not go as far as saying it would be good for, allowed for any commercial use or even any nonprofit that reached out to the community. If it was a nonprofit serving the people in the building, we might be able to allow it. Unfortunately, our code right now does not anticipate development like around a light rail station like this. We discussed doing a PUD, but there's no way that it could meet the intent of the PUD because our PUD code is very specific where it says it can't be used to get around sections of the code where it's just that nothing fits. So it couldn't be a mixed use zone for the developer because the mixed use allows a mixture of commercial and residential, but it requires the entire first floor to be commercial. And that was way more commercial space than they felt it could support and it would support their project. So what you have before you tonight is an R3 zoning request that would allow 100% residential. Now, the applicant has indicated that they want the community room and at a later date would like to possibly convert that to some other type of use. As I told him, we are about to embark on a rewrite of the code. I think it's one of the things that we've already identified that we need a couple of more types of mixed-use zones that allow some, maybe not 100% coverage of a first floor, but would allow some, realizing that, some places are not ripe or ready, and there are a lot of ways to do it. Our code just doesn't allow us to do it now. So I wanted to clarify that what had been discussed about allowing a not-for-profit there or a commercial use right now is not appropriate under our current code. And there's really no zoning classification that he could have asked for that would work to make a commercial use with the residential in our current code. So just want to try to provide that bit of clarity before you made a decision.
Thank you, sir. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Tolbert? Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Thank you, Mr. Tolbert. Just curious, if we have plans to include a new zoning type that would allow for the request that's being made, is it possible to include that as part of the ordinance with some sort of deadline that they would be able to apply retroactively for that type of zoning and maybe
Well, again, he will be able to apply for that zoning to allow that, or we may apply it if we come up with what works. As part of your review and review of the zoning maps, we could apply a new zoning to this property down the road. If we're successful in getting 12 to 14 months and getting a new land development code, that'll probably tie in nicely to about the time he's ready to occupy, given how long it takes to do construction. And so, he would be, they might just work smoothly there, but one way or the other, I think we do need a code change, and I think y'all would recognize that. That we need something that's more flexible in our mixed use that gives some alternatives. It may be more than one mixed use zone, and maybe 2 or 3, depending on, some around light rail stations would be appropriate, and they may not be the same as in other parts of the city.
Yeah, understood. And I may reframe my question a little bit. Is there a way to get a commitment from both parties, the city and the applicant, that when that zoning becomes available, it would be applied to this property, such that we don't end up down the road with a zoning commitment that doesn't require mixed use?
If I may, once the entitlement is set within R3, that is the limit. So it would have to be rezoned in the future to take advantage of those zoning changes that might occur as a result of the rewrite of the code. There's no way to have that kind of contingency or trigger in this zoning at this time, because we just don't have it in the code elsewhere.
Can we request a good faith commitment? I mean, is that something?
Well, keep in mind that the zoning is something that would have to happen by city council, a rezoning. So we can't commit a future council to that kind of decision. We don't know what a future council would do. So that would be my concern on our side. I can't speak for the applicant.
Okay, yeah, I'll be interested to hear the applicant's comments as well. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble.
On that basis, I continue to believe that this is not an appropriate use for the property here to have it all be residential when it's right beside the light rail on Colorado Boulevard. It's a very busy street. I don't even understand the logic of the ULI tech report that put commercial on 72nd when there's a sheriff's station, a community center, school, residences. That's not going to be commercial. The commercial is going to be on Colorado Boulevard. It's not going to be on 72nd. So any effort to transfer it onto 72nd is just not correct. I don't think the ULI people actually drove the area and took a look at it. I think it's a real shame because it would have been perfect in that area. And maybe we can put the coffee shop on the 5th floor in the building across the street that we have. But at the moment, I think multifamily is not appropriate use for that property right there by the light rail, and importantly, by a gravel pit, which is very dangerous for children and adults and so forth.
Councilmember Hurst.
This might be for Attorney Hayter. Can we explain why we don't have a conditional use process in this type of zoning? This type of process? Why there's no out on this one?
I don't think I understand your question.
So if you have a certain type of zoning in an industrial area, you can get a conditional use permit for things that are outside of our code. Why don't we have that for residential?
We do have conditional use permits that are available. And
Why would that not be available here? This is the genesis of the question.
I'd have to go look at the CUP criteria and see if it's something that would fit, but I think maybe the director or Deputy City Manager Rogers could speak to that more eloquently than I could.
Simply put, Councilmember Hurst, is that the underlying zone district R3 does not have for consideration by the CUP process commercial as a ground for accessory or ancillary use.
Thanks for that explanation. I think that may be something we consider for some of these smaller opportunities where it's not the full first floor, is that if you can bring a good case forward as to why you should get a conditional use in an R3 setting, maybe that's one route we explore.
Councilmember Madera.
So I guess, what does this mean for the project? Does this mean there's going to be more units now?
I mean, the owner would have to speak to that, but you would be approving the zoning for multifamily, and he's got his plan that does not anticipate the commercial at this time, so.
I guess what I'm getting at is you know, in my mind, now we have a different set of impacts to this area that weren't previously considered. And so, you know, it makes it hard for me to support something if I don't know what the change is and what the impacts of those changes are going to be.
I think, hold on just a second.
Can we answer?
Did the application specify a number of units?
No, this is for annexation zoning.
No, okay, but it didn't specify.
Yes, up to 98.
Okay. Ms. Riley tells me the application specified up to 98 units, which that would be the limit under this zoning this time. So the fact that we don't have commercial doesn't mean he could add any more than that under the current proposed zoning.
But so I guess, you know, the transportation traffic study that we saw, you know, is that for 98 units or was it for the 89 that were previously proposed?
Where'd she go? That should have anticipated. I'm not sure, but Anita might be able to, if she can get over here. Yeah, you can go over there. Go over there, come here.
All right, council, if you'll indulge me for a second, there's a lot of questions as far as the future of this development, what is actually being proposed, what is permissible. I think maybe the best thing we could do is continue this to another date whenever we can have an update from the UOI on what their report said, as well as get a further clarification on proper zoning and what can actually go here, what cannot go here. Does anybody object to that? We need to reopen the public hearing?
You did close the public hearing previously, so if you're going to hear from the applicant, it'd probably be a good idea to go ahead and reopen that. Although if you just have specific questions from him, I don't think that you necessarily need to reopen the hearing, keeping with past practice.
I mean, that was, you know, a good job of.
I think you should probably reopen the hearing at this point, yes.
Thank you very much. All right. Before I do, Councilmember Ford, you had your hand raised. Did you have questions for staff regarding this before we open the public hearing?
Yeah, I'm glad that you're opening the public hearing because I'd like to hear from the applicant, but it seems like we're working against ourselves with the opportunity to drive some commercial in this development and have some services for the residents in the area as well as the residents of the new development. I would like to see if we can get a commitment, but it seems like we're working against ourselves on trying to get some commercial pieces within the opportunity here for this development. But I'm excited to hear from the applicant. Thank you.
Mr. Hayter, do you want to address the council before I open the public hearing?
I know that there was an idea floating around behind me that another potential solution might be to amend where CUPs can be applied for to include an R3 district, which might all provide an alternative solution for the board to look at. Of course, that's a legislative solution that requires another code change. Outside of that, I don't have anything further to add at this time.
Did you want to address the council regarding the public hearing before it's opened?
In terms of my normal question about?
Yes.
Yes, sure. Is there anybody on the council who is unable to make a decision based on the facts presented at the public hearing and what's developed in the record? Seeing nobody indicating they have an inability to do so, there's no recognized conflict of interest that would prevent anybody from deciding the case tonight.
Thank you. This time I'm going to reopen the public hearing on Ordinance Z-984-22. Would the applicant like to address the council?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor, council members. My name is Marcus Pockner. I represent the applicant on this matter. Nice to be back in front of all of you. Very much appreciate you allowing us to say a few words. I do want to say, and I want to say this in full collaboration, we found out the content of the planning director's clarification email that went to you all late Friday. It was our understanding, and I want to be very clear about this, we concur that in an R3 zone district, a purely commercial use does not work. We understand that. We actually had a very detailed discussion with this council and the mayor about that matter. But there are other permitted uses in the R3 that allow things. For instance, a daycare, a vocational school, many other uses that are allowed. Our tenant that we have talked to, our potential partner on this, we spoke to, they understand that what may come from is not a purely commercial use, and they completely understand it and want to be here. But most importantly, if you set everything else aside, Councilman Grimes, you had a very, very fair point. How do you know our good faith? We're building this space. We are building the 2,000 to 3,000 square feet. And our commitment is we're not turning it into units. It's not changing the impact whatsoever, Councilman, respectfully, because we're going to build exactly what we presented to you all. We are meeting the code entirely. We are meeting the stamp plan entirely. And we are presenting just what we presented to all of you. So CUP is here with us tonight. Nothing has changed. We are still asking for that. There are a number of permitted uses under the R3 that are not just residential. A daycare could go there. Other things are allowed. We want to work to find that. I would agree with the planning director, staff. There are more elegant solutions that come down the road, right? That maybe there is a change to that zone district. But if we don't build this space, it doesn't happen. Our commitment to all of you is we're building this for retail. So we want to have this space there. We want to work with council. We had such a wonderful and positive discussion, and we're going to do exactly what we said we're going to do. So I would ask if there is not support for that, maybe we could talk about that in some way, because we don't want this to go away. We're building affordable housing, and we're building this space that can have that community use, and maybe someday with some change, maybe a conditional use permit or the update to the code, truly retail. But until then, we're going to make this space work for the community and have that gathering space and that retail space that we were talking about. So that's what I just want to say and reiterate our commitment. If people feel like somehow that has changed, I just want you to be assured we are not changing one thing. We are not adding more units. We are not changing that ground floor space. We are committed to building just what we said. So, Mayor, I'll be brief on that, but I'm happy to answer any questions that you or your colleagues may have.
Thanks, sir. Appreciate that. Does anybody on council have any questions for the applicant they'd like to address? Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. This is really, I think, probably for staff, but Mr. Pockner, you spoke about other allowable uses in R3. Could staff clarify what some of those might be? And is nonprofit one of those?
So I'm going to try to get as close as I can to the mic.
Can I say something before?
By all means, sir.
I just want to be clear that nonprofit isn't a land use. It's a tax status.
Understood.
So I think there's a lot of people throwing around, it's like, can we have nonprofits here? Can we have nonprofit? Well, again, it gets to what are they doing and how is the land being used, not the status. So just for clarification, as Jason's talking through this, like regardless of the tax status of whatever entity is operating there, that's irrelevant to whether it's an allowable use. So I'll let Jason.
Let me ask it more directly then. Is CUP an allowable use in that space regardless of tax status?
It would depend entirely on exactly what they wanted to do in the space. I mean, it may be able to be made to meet something that's there. The gentleman was right. There are other uses allowed. It's just the conversation we've had has not been specific enough that, that we would know exactly what CUP was doing and did it qualify. I haven't seen anything yet to support that.
I would defer to CUP's representative to correct me on this, but it sounds like vocational education opportunities might be an allowable use under R3. And my understanding is that CUP is used as a training tool, training opportunity and job for baristas. And so does that qualify as vocational education?
I mean, honestly, I would have to look at the code specifically and check definitions. And I hate to give an answer on the fly like that.
That's okay, and I appreciate that. what I'm getting at is kind of what Councilman Ford was getting at. We're working against ourselves with a really good opportunity in front of us. And I want to see us find a solution where we can have CUP in that space as well as this development move forward.
Absolutely. I mean, we do too. We want to see it be successful. And if we can find a way to make it work, we'll be happy to do that.
Any other questions from council? Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you. I would like an opportunity for Ms. Churches to address the council and kind of provide some feedback on CUP.
Thank you. My name is Chris Churches, and I'm the Coffee House Director. So I'm representing CUP, and I wanted to thank you for just allowing for comments. I appreciate you giving me that opportunity. So we're excited. We love that space, and we're grateful to the applicant because we are in the business of helping people, and we have to rest on the kindness of others. And so they approached us and were like, hey, we want to give you a coffee house, another one to promote your programming. And so we just walk through doors that are open for us. So it's a great opportunity for us. So that's why we're here, to just ask the council to be creative with zoning so that we can be there. We will have classes, mentorship. We will continue our program. We do have a social enterprise of a coffee house, but we use it as a training tool. So our baristas and our mentors work together within our coffee house. And we've opened 3, now 2 just this year. And so we've seen this huge benefit of what it is when we have more houses open and more opportunities for baristas. So we're pro another coffee house and excited and hoping that you guys can be creative and find a way to zone it for educational purposes or something. I don't know all the correct lingo, but I do know that as a nonprofit, we have to rely on the kindness of others, and we're changing lives every single day. And so we're just like, let's keep going, do more. So yeah, that's why I'm here, and I'm excited about it.
Thank you so much. And that's exactly what I wanted this council to hear, because I know the work that you do in Reunion at that coffee house and the lives that it's touching. And I think that's something that I personally want to see brought to the core city as well.
Thank you.
Thanks.
Thank you.
Does anybody else on council have any questions? Seeing none, is there anything else that the applicant wanted to address or?
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. I'll just say, maybe in closing, again, we think we are on to a solution. We want to move forward. We have a terrific partner, but more importantly, folks, we're going to build this. Whatever we presented to you, we're going to keep the exact same unit counts. There is no changes. I will say, and I know you all understand this very well, we are probably 14 to 16 months, if we're fortunate to have you move this forward, away from these buildings being open. This actually works really well, along with the update you received earlier in the night on some code changes and things like that. What I would like to say is, in addition to us just building this space, we will commit more than good faith in the next couple of months to figure out that use, right? We can start talking about that use. There are many other uses in the R3 that are allowed. We completely understand it's not about a nonprofit, it's about the use that's there. So educational, vocational, those are allowed. So we will commit to that openly, and we will figure that out. But again, thank you all very much. We are not changing, backtracking. We are more than committed, and again, in full compliance with the comp plan and the stamp plan. So thank you, Mr. Mayor.
Thanks, sir. This time I'll close the public hearing. Looking for a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading. What's that? Did you need something, Mr. Rogers?
Just for your continued consideration, Mayor and Council, as you probably heard, a number of different deliberations. And I'm going to look to the Community Development Director to correct me where I'm wrong. Looking at our land development code, and yes, vocational slash, private business, trade slash vocational schools are allowed by use by permit. However, there is not a qualifiable definition within our land development code to determine the parameters of what falls squarely within that box. So it's hard for me to make a leap of faith without really having community development working very directly with CUP as it pertains to, quite frankly, the inner workings of their program, to be able to say here today, yes, they fall into that category, and that we're not right back here before you in 6 to 8 months timeframe. What would probably be the most prudent, I would say, professional opinion that I can share with you is to continue the item to August 15th. That would allow for staff to have that conversation with CUP and with the developer to really go through the nuts and bolts and see whether or not that determination can be made. And if not, alternatively, we can also be looking at what I think are, to Attorney Hayter's position, some, I'll say, quick and easy and definable changes within our land development code for commercial uses, given the size and the scale and the scope, knowing that this is only going to be one of a handful of what I would think of future issues that we're going to have to deal with for these type of properties in and around the light rail or other situations, just because they're more fluid than what we may find in other greenfield development. But we could bring those forward to you all at the 15th so that you have enough information in front of you at that time to look at alternatives, but also potentially a reassessed interpretation. But wanted to put that out there for you all.
Thank you, sir. Appreciate that. Councilmember Grimes?
I had raised my hand for the motion. Don't know if you're ready for it yet.
Gotcha. Councilmember Ford?
I was ready to make a motion.
All right. Councilmember Grimes, you have a motion to make?
I do, thank you. Reading by council is seated.
I have a motion to approve on second and final reading, ordinance Z-984-22. Is there a second? Councilmember Ford?
Second motion.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading, ordinance Z-984-22. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Grimes?
No comment, thank you.
Councilmember Madera?
Along with this motion, will we be able to add the exception for the use? I mean, we can put conditions, right? But can we do essentially the opposite of that?
Attorney Hayter, if you can, City Attorney Hayter, if you could correct me if I'm wrong, given that this is a straight zone and not a PUD, there is no ability to condition the zoning.
I think under the charter, you have authority to condition the zoning. The problem here is I'm trying to reconcile quickly in my head is that conflict that would be created between the LDC and what's allowed in an R3 with your authority. So, and then the concern I have is the legality of authorizing a use outside of what was requested or sought by the applicant, in addition to, that this doesn't comport with the land development code. That I don't know if that would be upheld, if that could be a valid exercise of your discretion, or if that would be invalid, and have no effect. So I think I would need to research that to give you a definitive answer, Councilmember Madera.
There'd have to be someone to challenge it first, right?
Sure. Or, it might be an issue where it's void, that it has no effect.
So I guess going back to the questions about making it work, if we were to approve this now, is this something that staff could work with the applicant and bring back to council so, the project can carry on?
The easier step that could happen is if this was approved by council, staff would work on an independent ordinance that would look at establishing certain uses by independent ordinance that would look at establishing certain uses by conditional use permit not to exceed certain square footage in the R3, as an example of what could be brought forward to council to help reconcile this potential issue.
Okay. Thank you.
Councilmember Noble?
Mr. Rogers, would that be retroactive? If we approve an R3 right now, you wouldn't retroactively apply changes to an already approved zoning change?
So, yes, ma'am. Any use that is allowed by, any use that's approved by a straight zone, so R3, and if the ordinance is included to state that it's being zoned R3 and as amended, the uses that existed there are what they will have to be governed and have to follow today. If that R3 is amended in 6 months, 8 months, 10 months, 12 months, the ordinance in which it approved this zoning with the as amended or as whatever structure the city attorney would like, would then allow for any new uses to go into effect that would allow for them to apply for such.
I'd like to ask Councilmember Grimes and Councilmember Ford why you weren't willing to follow the advice of Mr. Rogers and carry this over to August 15th.
I don't personally see a need to, even at the advice of council, or at the advice of Mr. Rogers at this time, and maintain that I'd like to approve it as an R3 zoning. However, would like to make an amendment when the time is right.
I also agree. I think we've created this problem by not having the options to create some commercial opportunities in our R3 zonings. And so I want to see the project move along. I'm looking forward to the amendment from Councilwoman Grimes.
Councilmember Grimes.
Thank you, Mayor. And I may look for a little bit of assistance on wording, Mr. Hayter. I'd like to amend my prior motion to approve Ordinance Z-984-22 to include an exception for the specific use of the CUP organization within the space designated in the plans presented to council on first reading.
I think the only thing missing is the space provided is you're referencing the community space in the plans, correct? I think that's the
Correct.
only wordsmithing I think you would need to do there. So I understood that now, and I think that's clear. Is that clear to the chair?
No.
Okay.
I'll restate.
Thank you.
Great.
I move to approve Ordinance Z-984-22 to include the use of the community space as described by the CUP organization. Does that work? Happy to rephrase it again, just let me know.
You know, again, it's going back to some of my concerns I expressed to Councilmember Madera, but I mean, you can make whatever motion you want. I just don't know if it's going to be valid right now. And that's my concern.
And to Councilman Madera's point, it would have to be challenged, right?
Unless it's void ab initio. In other words, it's even at the time that you do it, it has no legal effect because it's conflicts with the law.
So let me state it
And I
this way
need to
then.
research
I'd like to make the motion this way, knowing that our staff is going to work with the applicant and potential ordinance and potential adjustments to zoning or a conditional use permit. But this, in my opinion, is the council's way of, should it be approved, the council's way of making that commitment back to the applicant.
I understand.
The second agrees with the amendment.
I have a motion and a second to approve on second and final reading ordinance Z-984-22 with the requirement that the applicant include the use of the community space for the purpose of CUP to occupy and operate out of. Is there any further discussion? Seeing none, Mr. Gibson, would you please take a roll call vote and read the title?
Oh, I do have one question. Sorry.
Councilmember Noble?
I'm sorry. The applicant refers to the stamp plan as if that's a law or something. Could you describe it to everyone what this reference is and what it actually is?
Was it adopted by council?
So the station area master plan, stamp plan, is what is more commonly known in the planning world as a specific plan. So you have your comp plan, which has a high-level perspective review pertaining to land use vision, policies, goals, things of that nature. The specific plan takes a much more detailed analysis and review of a geographic area with an intended land use and transportation system network that works one another together to ensure that you're creating a certain environment. The stamp plan, obviously with the forthcoming light rail station at the time, was to look at the ultimate development and build out of the 72nd light rail station, and I'll say 3/4, 1 mile, 2 mile radius of that outward at various uses over that 10, 15, 20, 25-year life frame, and the necessary infrastructure to support that. Within the stamp plan, while the overarching comp plan, and I'm looking to Steve or Jim to correct me, while yes, it considers mixed use, it's looking at mixed use across that larger geographic area. When opening the stamp plan itself, it speaks to this particular parcel playing its role as multi-family, high-density residential within the larger context of that discussion. So while it has a limited ability on, I'll say, force and effect with teeth, like you may find in your land development code, it is still advisory and adopted in nature by a previous council and by city staff in helping to provide an overall comprehensive vision, particularly for that area, and one more specific, particularly to that parcel with the high-density residential designation.
And does that stamp plan also envision a gravel pit next to that area?
The stamp plan envisions what is the gravel yard to the north of what is the parking lot for the light rail station as a mix of commercial office and parking lot. To the west, where you have that open field between the actual light rail station and the Platte and 76 is identified to serve as your high-density residential with a greenway along the Platte to encourage additional pedestrian activity and nodal activity. There would also be some component of commercial on that western site, but that's the general area what you find kind of encapsulating the actual light rail station itself.
Thank you very much.
Before we go on to vote, I'm going to comment. This is a motion that, based on the advice given by Mr. Hayter, I don't think I can support. If there's a question on whether or not the motion that we're voting on is even legal to begin with, then I don't think it's a motion that we need to be taking action on. So given that, as much as I want to see this project move forward for our community, I don't think that this motion is the correct manner in which we get that done. So I'm a no vote on this. Seeing no other requests for discussion, Mr. Gibson, please read the title and take a roll call vote.
Yes, sir. Ordinance Z-984-22, an ordinance amending the zoning ordinance and zoning map of the City of Commerce City, Colorado by zoning the property annexed at 7001 Colorado Boulevard annexation from ADCO Adams County A1 to Commerce City R3 as amended. Your vote is open. You'll have to revote.
All right, motion passes 4-3 with 2 excused absences. Now going to move on to administrative council business. Per council policy, except for emergency or unforeseen items, council members are encouraged to submit administrative business items by the Tuesday before the meeting with another council member's endorsement. Does anybody on council have any administrative business items of an urgent or unforeseen circumstance you'd like to address? Mayor Pro Tem.
Yes, thank you, Mayor. Just wanted it to be known that the 2 residents that spoke during the beginning at citizen communication are my constituents and they live in my ward. And this past 4th of July was very disturbing to my neighbors, constituents. myself, and several pet owners due to several illegal fireworks going off weeks before July 4th, and they continue to go off in my ward and other areas of Commerce City. My neighbor across the street from me had an illegal firework land in his living room window, which I have pictures of. He is not able to move back in his home yet. I would like to make a motion to direct the city attorney to prepare an ordinance that will ban all fireworks in the city and repeal the previous ordinance that allowed use of fireworks deemed legal in the state of Colorado on certain days and certain times. Thank you.
I have a motion to direct the city attorney to draft an ordinance that will repeal the permission of fireworks use in the city of Commerce City and ban all fireworks. Councilmember Grimes?
Didn't realize I was in the queue, but I'm happy to second the motion.
I have a motion and a second directing the city attorney to draft an ordinance that's going to ban all fireworks in the city of Commerce City. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Hurst?
I have my hand up for an earlier, or to be second on the list.
Councilmember Grimes?
Putting my hand back up for motions I'd like to make.
Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion is going to carry 6-1 with 2 absences.
Who was the nay, Mayor? I'm sorry.
Councilmember Hurst.
Thank you, sir.
Mayor Pro Tem, did you have another item?
No, that's all. Thank you, Mayor.
Councilmember Grimes?
Thank you, Mayor. Yes, I have 2 motions I'd like to make that were a result of actions I felt needed to be taken from tonight's meeting. First, I'd like to motion to award $2,500 to all schools within Commerce City, consistent with the sponsorship awarded to the Yeti Elementary Golf Tournament.
I have a motion to direct staff to prepare an ordinance to award $2,500 to all Commerce City schools. Would that include the Reunion Elementary School, or is that exclude them since they're already the recipient of sponsorship dollars?
My motion and the intent was to exclude the school that's already receiving the sponsorship.
Thank you. Councilmember Hurst?
Yeah, I would like to second that. If I can add a little bit to it. I would just like to also include the schools that are in Brighton that support our kids or our students, and that, because there's the high school and the middle school that have well over 10% of Commerce City students as their students in their schools, as well as any school that's doing educating children in the school year of 2022, 2023. So any new schools that are also coming on.
Councilmember Grimes?
Just seeking clarification on the amendment. Are you just indicating the schools that are within 27J in addition to Adams 14?
Yeah, basically when you say just in Commerce City, I wanted to make sure we were including the schools that are.
Absolutely, that was my intent. Thanks for clarifying.
I have a motion and a second to direct city staff to prepare an ordinance that would award $2,500 to all Adams 14 schools and all 27J schools within the city of Commerce City, as well as the 2 schools that serve Commerce City residents predominantly. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Noble?
I just want to make certain that none of the other schools have received sponsorship dollars from us this year. I wouldn't want this to become uneven.
I'm not aware of other schools having received sponsorships, but I do want to clarify that last year, the sponsorship, if you want to call it that was provided was not all schools. I think the mayor's clarification was spot on. It was the Adams 14 and 27J schools that serve students in Commerce City.
Again, that was my intent. Poorly stated, but that was the intent. Thank you.
Does this also include charter schools that are located within our city?
Yes.
All right, motion and a second to direct staff to prepare the ordinance awarding $2,500 to the schools mentioned. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion is going to carry 6-1 with 2 absences. Councilmember Grimes, you had another motion to make?
I do, thank you. I'd like to move to increase the scope of work with Lotus to include a greenhouse gas inventory for the city of Commerce City.
I have a motion to increase the scope of work for our environmental consultant to include a greenhouse gas inventory within Commerce City. Is there a second? Councilmember Noble?
I'll second that.
I have a motion and a second to increase the scope of work for our environmental consultant. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Grimes?
One comment. I want to make sure that my motion's clear that that's for the city itself, not for the boundaries of the city. Yeah, thank you.
Understood. Seeing no other requests for discussion, I have a motion and a second to increase the scope of work for our environmental consultant to include a greenhouse gas inventory for the city of Commerce City. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. Does anybody else on council have any administrative council business they'd like to address? Seeing none, we'll move on to council reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Mr. Mayor, if I may.
Yes, sir.
When you voted on the zoning of 7001 Colorado, the vote was 4-3. But because your vote differed from the recommendation of the Planning Commission, you were required to have 5 votes for that to pass. So that vote failed, and the property remains unzoned at this time.
Thank you. Before we move on to council reports, does anybody on council have any administrative council business they wish to address? Councilmember Dara?
Yeah, I'd like to continue that case to the August 15th meeting. And then, we'll just start with that motion.
Have a motion to continue ordinance Z-984-22 to the August 15th city council meeting. Is there a second? Councilmember Grimes?
So moved.
Have a motion and a second to continue ordinance Z-984-22 to the August 15th meeting. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Dara?
Yeah, and no, I guess, going along with the continuance, to find a way to make this work, and whether it be conditional use permit or having to adjust our LDC, but to bring back a solution for us to make this work in a manner that is both legal and allows development how it was intended to be.
All right, motion and a second to continue ordinance Z-984-22 to the August 15th meeting. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion is going to pass 5-2 with 2 excused absences. Got that one, Mr. Gibson? Yes, sir. Thank you. All right, moving on to council reports. Mr. Tinklenberg.
Thank you, Mr. Mayor. Just wanted to give you an update on COVID. The number of COVID cases in the Denver metro area has dropped somewhat, but still remains relatively high. The 7-day average is running at 2,082 right now. Also wanted to report back on the individual that raised the complaint at last Monday's meeting regarding police department. The police department followed up that same evening, and the gentleman was not able to provide any substance to the allegations that he made. Also, wanted to let you know that staff is reviewing the initial draft of the impact fee study, and that is planned to be brought to you in August. Also, we have met with the HR staff. They are examining self-funding for health insurance for the organization. So that is under study, and hopefully we'll have some additional information that can be shared with you relatively soon. In terms of activity, community development currently has 167 active entitlement applications that are under consideration or being worked on. And year-to-date, 630 residential permits have been issued. The inspectors have conducted 20,655 building inspections year-to-date. And you'll see the result of that information coming to in our upcoming budget sessions. The code enforcement staff have achieved a 97% compliance rate, and that's over 8,964 cases year-to-date. Wanted to also report that we had the groundbreaking at Third Creek, and that's for installation of infrastructure that would extend water, sewer, and widen roadways on the east side of E470. And so that's a highlight that will allow some development to start occurring on the east side of E470. Mayor Huesman and Councilmember Noble, in addition to staff, joined Cowley Companies and their development team for that groundbreaking. And then Public Works, they have started receiving bids for the 96th Avenue project that is funded under the 2K Cinderella bonds. And also the Parks Maintenance, variable hour employees, they've gained a little bit ground there in terms of adding a few more people, but still only at 23 of 32 positions. And again, that'll have an implication for the budget that we bring to you. The proposal is to convert some of those variable hour employee positions to full-time employees to help provide service year-round. I reported earlier that the staff was working with a consultant on assessment of the fleet leasing program. Staff met with the consultant last week, and they're working on data collection right now, and they anticipate by the end of the month having the first phase of that done, and then second phase by October. Otherwise, there have been a number of reports or complaints about weeds, and we've been passing that on to the staff to get on top of that. Unfortunately, with the hot weather, the weeds grow like weeds. In addition, they are taking care of mowing operations, so that's a quick overview for you. Thank you.
Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Tinklenberg? Seeing none, Mr. Hayter?
Yesterday, I sent out a couple updates to council about ongoing litigation. One is with the state with regard to House Bill 22-1024. In that communication, I let you know that we were trying to get a really fast turnaround with a reply brief based on what the state filed on Friday. That reply brief was in fact filed today, so we had a week to do it, but we're trying to show the court that we're trying to expedite this and move this quickly to allow the court time to make a decision. So I guess if I gave kudos, it'd be to the lawyers in the Denver City Attorney's Office who worked on that over the weekend to get that done. At the same time, I forwarded to you the pre-hearing statement that the city filed with the Water Quality Control Commission with regard to Regulation 38, and I won't go into detail about that one here. But if you have any questions, you can always feel free to ask me about that. Hopefully you've had a chance to review those documents. I know it was yesterday afternoon or evening that I sent those. But if you do get an opportunity to review those and have any questions, just let me know. Thank you.
Thanks, sir. Does anybody on council have any questions for Mr. Hayter? Councilmember Noble.
Technically, my question is for either Mr. Hayter or Mr. Tinklenberg. I was contacted by a resident who lives in Third Creek. So there is an enclave there of homes that Third Creek West will surround. It's in unincorporated Adams County. There are many homes there. They don't know who they're supposed to reach out to, and my question is, do they fall among the 300-foot or 500-foot radius for contacting them when anything happens with the property, or do they not receive that information because they live in unincorporated Adams County?
The land entitlement happened, I want to say, 2 years ago or 3 years ago. I think it was prior to COVID, so that would put it at about 3-year mark. So the notices would have gone out at that time, and whoever lived within the certain distance that's required for notice would have received notice back then. I know there were meetings with residents in that area, but I wouldn't know if it included this particular resident that you spoke with.
So unincorporated Adams County residents would have been among those who received notices.
Right?
Yeah, our notice requirements in Land Development Code, when it comes to land use cases, does not limit that notice to Commerce City residents. It is for the owners of property adjacent, or within that area, depending on the footage, 300 feet or whatever it is, depending on what you're looking at. It is not restricted only to Commerce City residents or Commerce City addresses.
Okay, and are there any requirements for what is supposed to be on a notification sign at a property when there is a potential decision coming from either administrative approval or a public hearing?
Yes, that information is contained in Land Development Code Section 21-3190, which addresses notice content.
So we have new 4-by-6 foot signs, and while the size is what the city council was aiming for, the information that was on the previous paper signs is not on those signs. So you wouldn't know what the deadline is, for example, or any of the other steps that are involved, or what type of use is going to be on the property.
Councilmember, we, in changing the signs and the format, we thought we had captured everything that had to be there. As I told you last week, we've beefed that up, and we'll make sure there's more information. We were trying to balance, get the size sign in the 4x8 and then the information when it's in 2 languages so it could still be readable. And I think that somebody may have made a decision and left a line out, but it did say it was it does say it's a subdivision. It does give you most of the information, tells you where to contact, but we are adding to have every detail at this point from, we've done a QC of that effort and made sure that we had it correct.
Yeah, because the deadline is critical.
Yes.
If the deadline isn't there,
Right.
I mean, you don't know what you're doing when you contact. It says 4 questions, call blank.
Yes, ma'am. I mean, we get that.
Yeah.
We're going to have it fixed moving forward. It was a mistake on that one. Somebody made a decision about balancing, and it didn't quite work.
Okay, but it says administrative approval, so it would be something that a resident would have to act on. The reason it's coming to mind is because this resident who contacted me about Third Creek today was talking about the paper signs that were up in his area that had blown away before he got a chance to do anything about them. And so it just brought to mind again the 4x6 signs, how great those are, but they don't contain the information that's useful to a resident.
Right, and we are working on getting a website up that will have even more detailed information. As soon as we get that live, which should be by the end of the month, we'll have a QR code on the signs too that we're going to add, so it will take you right there, so you'll get everything you need. And it'll be on the sign in case you don't know how to use a QR code or don't have the ability to,
Okay,
so.
why can't it include the information that was included on the paper sheets? And
we're-
that's why I think that's important, because we have people here who don't know what a QR code
No,
is.
that's what I'm saying. It will, in addition to the QR code.
All right then, thank you.
Yes, ma'am.
Any council members wish to make a report? Councilmember Grimes?
I still had a question
Oh,
for
okay.
City Attorney Hayter.
Go ahead.
I'd like clarification on the zoning ordinance that we just continued. The attached minutes from the Planning Commission meeting show a 5-0 vote to approve and recommend approval to City Council for the zoning R3. Why would we need a supermajority to pass the motion that was just made tonight?
You don't need a supermajority, but you need a majority of all those seated on council. In other words, you need 5 of 9 if you're adding a condition or adding something that varies from what the Planning Commission recommended. That's contained in section 10.11, subsection 10 of the charter.
Okay. I was just thinking of a recent time that we added a condition and didn't realize that that was necessary. Thank you.
Yep.
Mayor Pro Tem?
Are we council reports now?
What's
Or we're council
Yep.
reports, okay, yeah. I just wanted to let everyone know, this past Saturday, Councilmember Noble and Councilmember Grimes and myself had board and commission interviews, and we had some great applicants, and just wanted to encourage everyone in Commerce City. We greatly appreciate it and want to encourage more to apply for the boards and commissions in Commerce City. And then also on Saturday, I attended the Eco Fiesta that was hosted by Cultivando, and that was a great event as well. Thank you, that's all I had.
Any other council members wish to make a report? Seeing none, mine is brief, and the city manager made it for me. I was at the Third Creek West Infrastructure groundbreaking ceremony. With that, we'll move on to executive sessions. Looking for a motion and a second to enter into executive session of the city council and staff and consultants pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, parentheses F, for the purpose of discussion of the mid-year evaluation of the city manager. Mayor Pro Tem?
So moved.
Councilmember Madera?
Sorry, I'm not going to be seconding.
Councilmember Noble? I have a motion and a second to enter an executive session for the purpose stated. Is there any discussion? Councilmember Madera?
Yeah, we're down 2 council members, so I think, it's always been kind of the rule of thumb that city manager reports to all 9 of us, so it's important to have everyone's voice heard.
I have a motion and a second to enter executive session for the purpose stated. All those in favor signify by saying aye.
Aye.
Any opposed, say nay.
Nay.
Motion is going to fail 6-1. We will move on to executive session. Looking for a motion and a second to enter executive session for the pursuant to CRS 24-6-402, parentheses 4, sub-parentheses B and E of the Open Meetings Law for the purpose of receiving legal advice from counsel on the unauthorized disclosure of confidential documents. Councilmember Grimes?
So moved.
Councilmember Dara?
Second.
Have a motion and a second to enter executive session for the purpose stated. Is there any discussion? Seeing no request for discussion, we'll do a voice vote. All those in favor signify by saying aye. Any opposed, say nay. Motion carries unanimously. We'll now adjourn into executive session. The meeting broadcast and recording will be ended. Have a good night. Have a good week. See you next week. I'd like to invite staff and audience to vacate the chambers so the executive session can begin.